Alison Ford. She is a founding member of the Indigenous Social Justice Association of Melbourne. She has campaigned to stop Aboriginal deaths in custody since the early 1980s.
And it's magnificent to see all of you here demanding justice for Morangi, drop the charges against Lex Wotton and stop all Aboriginal deaths in custody. Now, I'd like to acknowledge that we're rallying today on the lands of the Kulin Nation. And on behalf of the Indigenous Social Justice Association, I thank each and every one of you for coming out here today. There's nothing there about a system where an Aboriginal man, a respected community member and father can be arrested by police in the circumstances in which Morangi was picked up on that fateful day in 2004. He had committed no crime. If this system really is meant to be a neutral one, I can tell you the figures sure don't add up. 3 members of the Palm Island community dead, 10 with criminal convictions, and Lex still facing court on the 21st of April. Meanwhile, Senior Sergeant Chris Hurley continues his police career and he has been posted to a plum job on the Gold Coast. Shame! And it's the same global system that framed up former Black Panther Rumia Aboriginal and still has him jailed on death row in the US.
Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land we are gathered today and pay respect to the elders, those who have gone before us and the generations to come. I would also like to acknowledge that one of the reasons we are gathered here today is that over 3 years ago on Palm Island, a man, a strong, proud Aboriginal man, died. I don't say his name out of respect for him and his family. He died in appalling and heartbreaking circumstances. And Palm Island is angry. They are shocked and outraged. And they are saddened. After Queensland's acting state coroner ruled that a senior police sergeant had caused the death of this Aboriginal man in custody, and then the Director of Public Prosecutions refused to lay charges, the emotions of the Palm Island community reached boiling point. The decision by the DPP not to lay charges sends a message that Aboriginal lives can be taken without consequence. Understandably, Palm Island erupted into protest, bringing the question of state racism in Australia to national prominence. Far from a riot, the protest was a completely justified act of anti-racist resistance. The Palm Island community stood up to the institutions of this racist system, the police station and the courthouse. They wanted the source of racism on their island, their home, to be gone from their lives. This was an expression of the distress and frustration over the death of yet another Aboriginal man in police custody, the 147th since the handing down of the Royal Commission in 1991. That the courts acquitted the police officer responsible for the death of an Aboriginal man in custody confirms how stacked the legal system is against Aboriginal people. And now the system has singled out one man, Mr. Lex Wotton, charged him with riot with a maximum prison sentence of life, calling him the ringleader of these alleged acts of destruction. Queensland's attempts to have Mr. Wotton jailed are aimed at intimidating all future opposition to racist persecution. The real aim in this terrible situation should be that it is made clear to police and the legal system that the brutal and violent treatment of Aboriginal people will not be tolerated and must result in severe consequences. I find it totally unacceptable that the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody's detailed recommendations are still not being fully implemented, not only by the Queensland Government but by all levels of government, and that they still need to be referred to so many years after they were handed down. It indicates that the genocide of our people still goes on. The Royal Commission found that there are common failings of both police and prison systems in the care of Aboriginal people in custody, stemming from a misunderstanding of the relationship between the custodian and detainee and the duties which flow from that relationship. One of the most disturbing features of this part of the inquiry is the inability or the unwillingness of custodial authorities to learn from past deaths. Proper efforts are still not being made to review existing practices and procedures or to identify the problems and take necessary steps to remedy them. It is unacceptable that when police detain Aboriginal people, they continue to ignore obvious injury, the need for medical attention and the level of consciousness. The Royal Commission observed that police did ignore or were unaware of serious medical conditions suffered by those taken into custody, which, if acted upon, almost certainly would have averted death. Aboriginal people are grossly overrepresented in our prisons. Some of the recommendations addressing this issue have never been acted upon or have actively been rejected by governments. This represents a major failure of social justice in Australia and raises concerns over Australia's compliance with its international human rights obligations. In the words of my father, Mick Dodson, when you are born as an Indigenous person in this country, you get a lifetime of on-the-job experience studying human rights through their absence. There were over 300 recommendations made by the Royal Commission, including that where possible, adequate access for Aboriginal prisoners to their family is paramount to ameliorate the stresses of prison life. Medical and psychiatric services must be made available. Further training of custodial staff is necessary to better understand Aboriginal culture. Methods of restraint must be reviewed. Aboriginal detainees should not be placed alone in prison cells, particularly when showing signs of physical or emotional stress. All of these recommendations and dozens more failed this man who died on Palm Island. 17 years after the recommendations were handed down, and still we ask why. Why does the system continue to fail our people? The charges against Lex Wotton must be dropped, and we must all continue to fight against Aboriginal deaths in custody. Justice for this man must also bring justice to those who protested his death in custody. And there must be justice before we can have any kind of reconciliation.
I'm quite happy to be here representing the Maritime Union today. We take our responsibilities for social justice very seriously in the Maritime Union. We've been involved in campaigns for social justice and self-determination for the Indigenous people of this country from Wave Hill and before that. We try to take a stand on all issues relating to people throughout the world, particularly in Australia, for justice and for a better standard of living for all peoples around the world. And particularly in Australia, where we're campaigning on the issues of the stolen generations. Also stolen wages, the stolen wages campaign in Queensland, a very important campaign, and now the campaign for stolen justice. We join our comrades in both Sydney and New South Wales and in Queensland in supporting all efforts to stop this hideous miscarriage of justice for Lex. So once again, the MUA stands beside our comrades, our Indigenous comrades. We always have, we always will, and we'll always be there for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, yes, MUA is here to stay.